Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader. So before this video starts, I want to say a big thank you to Troubled Dreams who helped me with this video. To check out his awesome channel and part 1 of our collaboration, click on the link on the screen or in the description box. And as usual, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. What I'm about to tell you is a completely true story. It happened to me back in the early 1990s when my 2 kids were very young. I have very rarely ever spoken of it and it still scares me to this day, even after all of these years. I was a young single mum who was raising 2 children on her own. I had a close friend who lived a few miles away and having no car at the time, I would often take the 2 kids on a walk to our apartment, weather permitting. My daughter was in a stroller and my son would walk beside me. If I was at my friend's place after dark, she would usually walk us part way home or sometimes her mum would drive us home. On this particular evening, she walked us part way like usual. Shortly after she turned around to head back home, we crossed a highway that had quite a few businesses and restaurants along it. We always took this way home and I never had felt afraid because this is a smaller sized town and I grew up here. After crossing the highway, we headed down a side street that was kind of dark. There were streetlights but they were spaced kind of far apart, so there were areas of this street that were pretty dark. Shortly after we had turned onto this street, I heard footsteps behind us, but didn't think much of it at first. We just kept walking at the time, until I noticed those footsteps seemed to speed up, as if the person was trying to catch up to us. I stopped and turned around and my heart about stopped in my chest. There was a very scary looking man right behind us. I've always been a very perceptive person, and I'm usually good at reading other people. I get these vibes or strong feelings about people, and when my inner alarm starts going off, I know well enough to pay attention to it. That inner alarm was shrieking at me to get out of there and fast. I didn't know what to do, and this was before cell phones were around, so it wasn't like I could just call the police on the spot. I did the only thing I could think of, and that was cross the street as fast as possible and head back to the well-lit highway, where there were lots of people around. We crossed the street and the creepy guy followed us. It was then that I knew for sure that my feelings about him were 100% correct, and that he was planning on doing who knows what to us. We kept walking very fast back towards the highway. He kept following us, and by this time he was muttering under his breath. I couldn't understand him and was too frightened and worried about my kids and my own safety to even care. I was intent on getting us out of that situation as quickly as possible. We thankfully made it to the highway, but had to wait for oncoming traffic before we could cross. The creep was standing directly behind us by this time, and I was too afraid to even turn around to face him. He then realized we were going to escape, so he grabbed my arm and said, "You aren't going anywhere." I yanked my arm, turned out of desperation and threw a punch at him, hoping to buy us some time. My punch landed on his cheek, which caught him off guard. I grabbed my son and picked him up, and we ran across the highway. I ran so fast I was afraid the stroller was going to tip over, but I managed to keep it upright. There was a pizza place right there when we crossed, and we ran inside. I told the lady working what had happened, but she had seen most of it and had already called the cops. She said to wait in there for them, which we did. As for the crazy guy, he was still standing across the street, pacing back and forth like a caged animal, yelling stuff that I thankfully couldn't hear. He was looking directly at me and would also shake his fist from time to time. As soon as he spotted the police car putting into the parking lot of the pizza place, he took off running. 2 cops had shown up in the same car, so one stayed with me and asked questions while the other went out to try and catch him. The police were unable to catch him, unfortunately. He had somehow given them the slip. I described him to the police, told them exactly what had happened, and they gave us a ride home. As far as I know, he was never caught, and that still haunts me to this day. I just hope that he didn't end up actually hurting someone else. To this day, I refuse to go out walking after dark. I just don't know for sure what this nut intended to do to us. But it couldn't have been anything good, that's for sure. Luckily, I was able to save our lives, but the thoughts of what could have happened to us keeps me awake at night sometimes, even after all this time. It's something that never leaves your mind entirely.
So this happened a week or 2 ago, and went on for a week. Not continuous, though. I am a 16-year-old male who lives in the United States. And I live in a very suburban area where not much happens. So this encounter happened 3 times, and it happened in December. I had recently gotten home from a party at a family friend's house. and I got home and fell asleep right away. Nothing strange. Being a heavy-set kid, I play football for my school. I got hot with a blanket on me, so I decided to open my window, which overlooks the front of my house and faces the street. So I fell asleep at around 11:30, and I awoke at about 1 a.m. for no apparent reason. And I look up out of my window, and there I see him. It's the silhouette of a man looking into my window. At first I think nothing of it. I see a man just staring at me, and I kind of laugh it off. I have always been a bit paranoid, and the fact that something actually happened to me was funny, so my only response was laughter. So after about 2 or 3 minutes, the man just walked away. I didn't see him again for another couple days. The same thing. I was up late studying for finals with my windows open, not thinking of anything except for passing my math final. Then, at about the same time, 1 o'clock to 1:30, I see the same shadow, and I think it's the same man. This time a bit more freaked out. I yell and call for my dad and uncle who come rushing in, but at this point, the man was gone. The next day was my final and creepiest encounter with the man. I was home alone with my door closed as I was again studying for finals, and I needed absolute concentration, when all of a sudden, I heard footsteps outside my door. Thinking it's my dad, I call out, and then all of a sudden, I heard my front door open and shut right away. I pulled up my curtains, and I saw the back of a man in a black coat running down my block.
This is a completely true story told by my daughter. It happened several years ago when she was away from home attending a university. She was around 21 or 22 at the time and has always had good sense, even as a kid. Very intelligent person. One weekend, she had come home to visit family and friends. When she went to leave, it was already late afternoon. It's about a 3-hour drive from here back to her university, so she had to go to the bathroom before she reached her destination. She decided to stop at a rest stop. Big mistake. When she pulled into the rest stop, one car was there. She got out of the car and started walking to the bathroom. A creepy guy got out of the driver's side of the parked car and she kept walking. By this time, she was getting a bad vibe and wished she hadn't left her car. She said she took her time in the bathroom, hoping that car would be gone when she came out. When she finally came out, the creepy guy was standing right outside the bathroom door. She was freaked out but tried not to show it. She walked to her car and the creep started following her. Her car was locked so she had to fumble with her keys. She had an older car at the time, so it didn't have the push button thing to open the doors automatically. She was trying to get the door open and the creep was almost behind her, when lo and behold, a conservation police vehicle pulled into the parking lot. The creep walked very quickly to his car and took off. My daughter told me she knew that the guy meant harm and she thinks there was another guy waiting in the car. She said if the officer hadn't pulled in when he did, something bad would have happened to her. It sounds to me like these weirdos were sitting there like a spider waiting for its prey. They were hoping a young woman by herself would show up. After that, she never stopped at another rest stop again. Thank goodness nothing happened to her, and the conservation officer was her guardian angel that day. She now knows the world is a very scary place and anything can happen.
This is my first post, so forgive me if I make a mess of it. First, I will give you a quick description of myself. At this time, I was 18, and a very short 5'2" female, slightly stocky, but maybe 130 pounds at the most. I stayed out late at my friend's house, my escape from my shitty family home, with her husband, and young daughter. We having our own get-together. Her house is set back in the county just out of the city limits, off a dark rural Mississippi road. Her street was full of family members, being named after the family. Not many people lived on the main road, as if you drove down it you were going to see someone you knew. The main road was not lit and very windy, covered on both sides by either ditches or trees, or both. Now, to one of the creepiest moments of my life. I leave their house, headed to my parents' home in the city, at 1:30ish in the morning, which is only a 10-minute drive. In my Isuzu rodeo hauling ass, with my music up, I make the first turn, less than 2 minutes away from my friend's house. Out of nowhere, a lady appeared in my headlights. I quickly got into the oncoming lane, as no one else was on the road, and stopped. Mistake 1. Being as I have had many horrible encounters in my life, I rolled down the passenger side window and asked the lady if she was all right. She replies, "Yes, I was angry at my husband, and I wanted to kill myself, so I stepped out in front of your car." "Are you fucking serious?" I said. She asks for a light and leans in to grab it from me, as I can smell the liquor on her. She rambles on about how she tried to make her and her husband wreck, pointing to a car in the ditch ahead, with a red pickup behind it. I didn't notice them until now from paying attention to her trying to jump in front of my truck in the beginning. I have chills and red flags going off everywhere. I had my phone hid under my leg and never put my car in park, just stayed on the brake. She claims a nice man stopped to pull their car out of the ditch, as I can now hear both men yelling and cursing each other. It seems as if they know each other, because you wouldn't curse at a man who's trying to stop and help you out, right? I should have just left, but I guess I wasn't totally freaked out yet. She stays close to my truck, trying to keep me in the conversation as to distract me, but I notice a light coming from behind. I check my rear-view mirror to see a shadowy figure with what seems like a cell phone light walking from behind, like they just jumped out of the trees. I looked at her and asked, "Who the fuck is that?" She points to her husband and the other man and names them, and I pointed behind me and said, "No, who is that?" She tries to keep me there, but looks angry almost. I immediately step off my brake and hit the gas, only to find the owner of the red truck blocking the whole road as I try to get by. I totally flipped and went straight into pure panic. I just gunned for the ditch and thankfully made it through. I hauled ass down the road for my parents' house and called the police. I never heard anything back, if they had found them or anything. But needless to say, let's never meet again, creeps.
This happened a couple of years ago when I still lived in my hometown. I was around 17 years old at the time. I was going home alone one night after a birthday party. It was around midnight. As I was getting close to my building, I noticed a guy on his bicycle, but I totally brushed it off as I thought he was just working out late. During the time, I always used to use the stairs and never the elevator. So, I go for the stairs and halfway to my apartment, I feel someone lightly pushing me from behind. I turn around, and yes, it's the same guy from earlier. He didn't seem scary or intimidating or anything like that, and my first instinct was to ask him if he needed any help or something, and I did. He didn't say a word, just stood there staring at me. At this point, I started freaking out a little but didn't want to scream and show off that I'm scared, so I just decided to keep going to my apartment. I didn't live alone, and I knew that once I got to my apartment everything was going to be okay. So, I kept going, and he went with me. When I saw that he's still walking behind me, I said, "I don't think I can help you out, but don't worry, my dad is home and you can talk to him." As soon as I stepped in front of my apartment door and knocked on it, he drifted away, running down the stairs super fast. My grandma was the only one home, and I told her what had happened. Everyone in my family is pretty tough, so she went down the stairs with a knife to check if he's still there, hiding somewhere. No sign of the guy. He just disappeared. Update. The second time I saw the guy, I was again walking home alone. This time, it was not that late and I was talking to my mum on the phone. We live separately, her and my dad and brother live together, and I decided to stay with my grandma when they moved out because I didn't want to leave her alone. As I got close to my building, I saw him, on his bike again, riding across the street. This time I panicked and told my mother, "Mum, the same guy that followed me home is on the street in front of the building." At first, she didn't understand what I was saying, so I told her the exact same thing again. When she understood what was happening, I could hear in her voice that she freaked out too. As I got to the main front door of the building, I didn't see him slowing down or coming after me, so I kinda felt relieved that maybe this time nothing's gonna happen. I was updating my mom on everything, where I am, where he is, if he's coming, and what's happening in general. Because of the previous encounter, I wasn't using the elevator. I got in, and I told to myself, here, nothing bad happened. And right before the door closed, a hand stopped it. There he was again, standing in front of me. I was strapped in the elevator, and he was standing by the door, not saying anything, just standing there staring. I couldn't go up. I couldn't get out. My mind blocked and I didn't know what to do. Still on the phone, I stupidly told my mum that I'm gonna hang up and call her later, but she stops me. "Don't you dare hang up on me now. Do you need me to send your dad?" Now, the truth is, yes, I wanted my dad to be there so bad, but it would take him 15 or 20 minutes to come from their place to mine, and I just said no. I didn't imagine myself standing there waiting for my dad to come for that amount of time. Then, I kind of came back from the shock and asked him, "What do you want?" And again, no response. After this, we just stayed there for like ages. It felt like hours. Me in the elevator completely panicked, this man at the door, and my mum constantly speaking to me through the phone. The door then just closed, and he left. As soon as the door closed, I pushed the button and went up to the last floor because I was scared he's gonna be there waiting for me in front of my door. I told my mum that he left, and that I was going to hang up on her so I can call my grandma to wait for me at the door, and I'm calling her as soon as I lock myself in the apartment. When I got to my door, my grandma was waiting for me at the door with a knife, angry how dare someone try to scare me like that. I got in, I locked the door as many times as possible, and called my mum to tell her that I'm safe now. I couldn't stop crying that night. After that night, I would see him riding his bike around in the neighborhood, but every time I would walk around until someone came to escort me. I would also see him around town when I was out with my friends, and he would always stare at me and follow me around for a bit. After a while, we found out that he lived very close to me, and that he was mute, and that made him freak out because his parents locked him in the attic when he was little. He followed a lot of girls and scared them, not only me. At first, I felt bad for him, and then I thought about it. The fact that he was mute didn't give this guy permission to follow girls and scare them like that. I guess I was lucky because other girls have complained that he touched them inappropriately. Also, one day I was walking to a local beauty store, and that's when I found out where he lived. As I was walking on the street, a big amount of water splashed in front of me, as if someone was trying to pour it over me. I looked up, and it was the same guy, looking over the balcony. I speed walked, and from then on, I tried to not walk on that side of the street. After that, nothing really happened to me again, and I hope nothing like that ever happened to other girls. Now, I go to university in a different city, but when I go back home, I don't see him that often, just a few times, and nothing weird happened. I just hope he got the help he needs, and is feeling better now, so no one else goes through what I went through. I had quite a few businesses and restaurants along it. We always took this way home, and I never had felt afraid because this is a smaller sized town, and I grew up here. After crossing the highway, we headed down a side street that was kind of dark. There were streetlights, but they were spaced kind of far apart, so there were areas of this street that were pretty dark. Shortly after we had turned onto this street, I heard footsteps at the time. I would often take the two kids on a walk to our apartment, weather permitting. My daughter was in a stroller and my son would walk beside me. If I was at my friend's place after dark, she would usually walk us part way home, or sometimes her mum would drive us home. On this particular evening, she walked us part way like usual. Shortly after she turned around to head back home, we crossed a highway that had... What I'm about to tell you is a completely true story. It happened to me back in the early 1990s when my two kids were very young. I have very rarely ever spoken of it, and it still scares me to this day, even after all of these years. I was a young single mum who was raising two children on her own. I had a close friend who lived a few miles away and having no steps behind us, but didn't think much of it at first. We just kept walking at the time, until I noticed those footsteps seemed to speed up, as if the person was trying to catch up to us. I stopped and turned around, and my heart about stopped in my chest. there was a very scary looking man right behind us. I've always been a very perceptive person, and I'm usually good at reading. Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader. So before this video starts, I want to say a big thank you to Troubled Dreams who helped me with this video. To check out his awesome channel and part 1 of our collaboration, click on the link on the screen or in the description box. And as usual, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy.